What's up everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we are doing something simple but brutal. We are taking some major Game of Thrones characters like Tyrion Lannister, Daenerys Targaryen and Ramsay Bolton, and putting the book version and the show version right next to each other. No fluff, no nonsense, just straight facts. I'm talking exact descriptions from the books, what actually shows up on screen, and why the difference matters. Some of these changes are small. Some of them are so big you will wonder if the showrunners even opened the same pages. If you have only seen the show, this is going to be eye-opening. If you've read the books, you already know what's coming. Let's get started. First up is Tyrion Lannister, the imp himself, who Peter Dinklage brought to life with that sharp wit and endless charm that had us all rooting for him through every trial. In the books, though, Tyrion's look is way more brutal and unpolished right from the jump, because Martin doesn't hold back on describing his dwarfism as something that twists his whole body and face into a constant reminder of the cruelty he has faced since birth. He has this oversized head with a bulging forehead that juts out over eyes of different colors. One of his eyes is a dark black that's almost swallowed by the pupil, and the other a mismatched green that doesn't quite line up, and his teeth are crooked and uneven, giving him a lopsided grin that's more grimace than smile, while his legs are so short and stunted that he waddles when he walks, not with any grace but like he's fighting the ground every step. And that's before the real damage hits. After the Battle of the Blackwater in a storm of swords, Sir Mandon Moore's attack leave him with a massive gash that slices from above his left eye all the way down across his face to his jaw, hacking off most of his nose, so there's just this raw proud flesh that's warm and puckered where it shouldn't be, and it never fully heals right, turning him into this scarred, half-ruined figure who hides behind cloaks and shadows even more than his mind alone would demand. On the show, Dinklage's Tyrion keeps some of that essence with the clever stares and the wine-stained shirts, but they dial back the deformity big time. He's got a full, straight nose from the start, and the scars after Blackwater are just a couple of clean lines across one cheek that fade into something almost heroic, not the mangled wreck that makes Book Tyrion feel like a monster in his own skin, and it changes how we see his vulnerability too. Because while show Tyrion battles prejudice through quips and smarts, the book's version carries it in every crooked step and mismatched glance that screams he has been marked as less than a human long before the knives come out. It's like the show wanted us to focus on his brain over his body, and honestly, that works for binge watching. But flipping back to the pages reminds you how much deeper that physical toll cuts into his soul. Now let us talk about Ramsay Bolton. He slinks in as the Flayer of the North whose cruelty isn't just acts, but a face that wears it like a second skin, introduced in A Clash of Kings as the bastard son who turns Moat Catelyn into a slaughterhouse before Roose even claims him. Martin sketches him as this fleshy brute in his early 20s, big-boned and slope-shouldered with a body that is already softening toward fat under pink and blotchy skin that flushes red when he's riled. Ramsay has these small pale eyes that dart like a ferret's under greasy strands of dark hair. He slicks back with no care for the sheen of sweat. Roose Bolton's bastard son has a nose that is broad and snubbed like a hog's nose, all framing a mouth full of small, sharp teeth that flash in grins too wide for the malice behind them. These features gives him this unlovely and almost boyish look that fools folk into underestimating the monster until the skinning knives come out. Ramsay's hands are meaty paws scarred from hunts and hurts, and he moves with a loose, predatory swagger that belies the pampered life at the Dreadfort, where even his armor strains at the seams from feasts of long pig. Iwan Rheon steps into the role with a chilling charm that starts sly and spirals into nightmare fuel, from the hounds baying in Season 3 to the wedding night horrors, and his lean, angular build with those piercing blue eyes and a smile that could sell secrets make him the perfect wolf in sheep's clothing. But the show gifts him conventional handsomeness, clean-shaven jaw, lithe frame without the fleshy promise, and hair that's artfully tousled rather than perpetually slicked, which lets his descent feel like a fall from grace, instead of the book's revelation of rot that's always bubbled under the surface. In A Storm of Swords, when he breaks Theon into reek with methods that twist the mind before the flesh, that ugliness underscores how his evil isn't hidden by looks but amplified by them. This makes survivors like Theon Greyjoy flinch at the sight alone. On the show, Rheon's version draws you in closer before the repel. This heightens the betrayal in scenes like the sack of Winterfell, but losing that innate repugnance that makes book version a walking warning from the gods. Ramsay Bolton is the kind of villain whose face alone justifies the North's old grudge against the Boltons. This is the one book readers still scream about. In the books, Catelyn starts as this poised woman in her mid-30s with the classic Tully look, thick auburn hair braided tight against the wind, blue eyes sharp as fishhooks that miss nothing from Robb's war counsels to Ned's hidden letters, and a face that's handsome in its firmness, high cheekbones and full lips that curve into smiles rare as southern snow, all on a frame that's softened by motherhood but still carries the grace of a girl who once raced boats on the Trident. But after the Red Wedding in A Storm of Swords, where the phrase cut her throat ear to ear amid the blood and betrayals, Beric Dondarrion's outlaw band finds her body 3 days drowned in the river, and in a desperate twist of the Lord of Light's fire, he gives her his life at the cost of his own, reviving her not as the Catelyn we knew, but as this gaunt and undead revenant with her skin gone grey and slack like wet parchment. Lady Stoneheart had this gaping slash in her throat, which bubbles wet rasps whenever she tries to speak. She has one of her eyes turned milky and blind from the hanging rope's twist, while the other burns with a mother's undying hate. The new Catelyn's hair matted into bloody ropes that hang like nooses down a neck that is too thin for the weight. Now almost skeletal, her fingers are clawed and blackened from the pyre's echo, with her clothes rotting tatters that flap like banners of the forgotten. Now the leader of the Brotherhood without banners, she is on a silent crusade of nooses and knives against anyone who is Frey-scented or Lannister-tainted with her justice, as merciless as the grave she crawled from. Michelle fairly embodies the living Catelyn with that quiet ferocity, from the grief-stricken watch over Bran's coma in Season 1 to the desperate pleas at the twins in Season 3, her auburn waves and those clear blue eyes making every maternal choice, from releasing Jaime to burning Arya's message, feel like a gut-wrench of noble sacrifice, but the show lets her die there in the hall, throat slit and body dumped. Skipping the resurrection entirely to streamline the Starks' arcs toward resurrection themes like Jon's instead, and while it spares us the horror of her as a strung-out zombie who hangs men from weirwoods without a word, it robs the book's raw poetry in how her transformation mirrors the world's unmaking. Her transformation turns the voice of reason into a silent judge, whose rasping grip on Brienne in a feast for Crow's forces even the Maid of Tarth to question oaths. This change would have shattered Fairley's poise into something spectral and unforgettable, leaving show fans to wonder at the empty ache where her vengeance should howl. Shifting north beyond the wall next, because no list like this would be complete without Ygritte, the fiery wildling who steals Jon Snow's heart and teaches him that love doesn't care about oaths or walls. In A Storm of Swords, where their romance really ignites amid the frozen wilds, Martin sketches her as this tough, unpretentious survivor who's beautiful in a raw, untamed way, but nothing like the polished redhead we get on screen. Her hair is a wild, matted tangle of dirty red that hasn't seen a brush since the last thaw, so knotted and filthy that Jon half wonders if she only combs it when the seasons shift. And her face is round and peasant plain with a snubbed pug nose that's been broken once or twice in scraps, plus teeth that sit a little crooked in her mouth, giving her that lopsided smirk, while her eyes are set just a bit too wide apart, making her gaze feel both fierce and a touch off kilter, like she's always sizing you up from an angle you didn't expect. She's got this sturdy build from years of raiding and riding, not slender but solid, with freckles scattered across her cheeks from the harsh sun, and her clothes are ragged furs patched together with whatever she could scavenge, all of it screaming that she's one with the wild more than any pretty picture. Rose Leslie nails the spirit in the show, that bold laugh and the arrow-sharp aim that pins Jon right where it hurts, but they amp up her looks to something more conventionally striking. Her hair falls in these loose, fiery waves even when she's knee-deep in snow, and her face is all sharp angles and clear skin without the peasant roughness, turning her into this ethereal wild beauty who looks like she stepped out of a ballad rather than clawed her way through one. And it softens the edge of her wildling life a bit, because in the books, that plainness makes her bond with Jon feel more real and earned, like he's falling for the grit under the dirt, not just the flame-colored hair that catches the light just so. You can see why the casting leaned that way though. It makes the stolen moments in the cave hit harder visually, but it pulls some of the authenticity from how Martin grounds his lovers in the muck of their worlds. Now let's head east to Essos, where Daenerys Targaryen rises from scared sister to dragon mother, but her iconic silver gold hair and those piercing eyes get a subtle but telling makeover that ties right into her Valyrian bloodline. From her first scenes in A Game of Thrones, the books hammer home that Dany's the living embodiment of old Valyria with skin like cream pale enough to show blue veins underneath. But it's her eyes that steal the show, true violet, not blue or grey like the show settles on, these deep amethyst pools that glow almost otherworldly when she's angry or scheming, and her hair is that signature silver blonde so fine and straight it shimmers like polished metal in the sun, falling past her waist in a sheet that she braids with bells or leaves loose to mark her as Khaleesi. She's described as slender to the point of fragility early on, with small breasts and hips that haven't quite filled out from her youth, and after walking into Drogo's pyre to hatch her dragons in the same book, her eyebrows and lashes burn away along with every hair on her body, leaving her bald and smooth as an egg for months, while it all grows back slower than you'd think, forcing her to confront her vulnerability in a whole new way amid the Dothraki stares. Emilia Clarke captures that fire and grace perfectly, evolving from wide-eyed bride to unyielding queen with those commanding stares that could melt unsullied steel. But the show skips the violet eyes entirely. Maybe contacts were a hassle, or they wanted her to blend more with the human cast, and her hair stays that platinum blonde without ever going bald after the pyre, keeping her looking regal and unbroken even in her lowest moments, and while it doesn't derail the plot, it misses how those book details amp up her alien heritage, making every glance feel like a reminder that she's fire made flesh, not just a girl with a temper. Plus, that temporary baldness in the books adds this layer of raw exposure right when she's claiming her power, turning her rebirth into something more physically stripping and real, whereas the show keeps her veiled in that flowing mane to emphasize the myth from the start. Sticking with Essos for a beat, because Sir Jorah Mormont, Dany's grizzled protector and secret heartbreaker, looks like he was built for a different kind of knight's tale in the pages. In A Game of Thrones, when he first swears his sword to her in Pentos, Martin paints him as this weathered bear of a man pushing 50 with a bull-thick neck and shoulders that strain against his chainmail. But his head is completely bald from a receding hairline that's long given up, leaving just a fringe of coarse black curls around the ears. And that hair doesn't stop there. It's thick and wiry across his chest, arms, and back, sprouting like brambles so heavy that it peaks from his collar and cuffs, giving him this unkempt, almost animal ruggedness that clashes with his honorable vows. His face is broad and lined from years of exile and fighting, with a square jaw shadowed by stubble he can't quite tame, and grey eyes that crinkle at the corners when he smiles, but overall he's no heartthrob, just a solid, unlovely knight whose loyalty shines brighter because it's not wrapped in good looks. Ian Glenn brings that quiet intensity to the role, the way he watches Dany with eyes full of unspoken longing that tugs at your chest every time, and his build fits the bearish frame with those broad shoulders that scream he's seen too many battles. But the show gives him a full head of salt and pepper hair that waves just right, softening him into this silver fox with chiseled features and a smolder that makes his unrequited love feel almost poetic instead of pathetically one-sided. They trim back the body hair too, keeping him looking groomed and knightly rather than wildly hirsute, and it shifts Jorah from the book's flawed everyman, whose plainness makes his devotion to a goddess-like queen all the more poignant, into a more cinematic crush, which works for drawing us into Dany's orbit but loses some of that earthy contrast Martin loves to play with between his heroes and their ideals. Heading back to the Riverlands now, where Brienne of Tarth stands out as the Maid of Tarth, but her journey from ugly duckling knight to honorable warrior hits different when you see how the books lean into her physical mismatches. In A Clash of Kings, when she joins Renly's Rainbow Guard, she's introduced as this towering girl of 16 with the strength of 3 men crammed into a frame that's all awkward angles. 6 foot 3 inches of freckled, sunburned skin stretched over muscles like knotted ropes, but her face is the real kicker, plain and battered with a nose broken so many times it's squashed flat, lips that swell thick around her mouth from old fights, teeth crowded and uneven behind them, and brittle yellow hair cropped short to keep it out of sword reaches, framing blue eyes that are her only soft feature, wide and guileless like a summer sky. She's got square, homely features that make small folk whisper she's more horse than woman, and her hands are calloused slabs from years of gripping hilts, all of it screaming that beauty's not her armor in a world that prizes it above steel. Gwendoline Christie's portrayal is a triumph, that lanky height and those fluid sword swings that make every duel feel epic, and she keeps the blue eyes and the cropped blonde hair to nod at the books, but the show casts her as strikingly beautiful in a fierce, Amazonian way, high cheekbones, clear skin without the freckles or breaks, and a face that commands respect through symmetry rather than defiance, turning Brienne's outsider status from one rooted in outright ugliness into something more about gender norms and height alone. In the books, that plainness fuels her drive to prove herself twice over, making her oath to Catelyn and her clashes with Jaime feel like battles against her own reflection as much as the world, whereas the show's version lets her shine as an icon of strength without the extra hurdle of mirrors that mock her. And while it's empowering, it skips the quiet triumph of book Brienne earning love despite, or because of her unlovely shell. No dive into these differences would skip the Hound, Sandor Clegane, that hulking shadow to Joffrey's cruelty, whose burned face tells a story of brotherly betrayal long before his sour words do. From his debut in A Game of Thrones, escorting Sansa through the streets after Ned's fall, the books make his scars a nightmare etched in flesh. The left side of his face is a melted ruin where his brother Gregor held him to a brazier as a boy, ear burned clean off leaving a ragged hole that whistles in the wind, eye socket untouched, but ringed by twisted black scar tissue that's hard as boiled leather, pocked with craters like cooled lava and cracked open in places that ooze red when he snarls or sweats. While his mouth pulls uneven on that side, lips fused into a perpetual half-snarl that bears yellowed teeth, his jawbone pokes through in spots where skin won't knit, and the whole mess gives him this lopsided growl that echoes his inner rage, built on a frame that's 7 feet of lean muscle scarred from head to toe, with a voice like gravel under boots. Rory McCann embodies the menace and the hidden hurt, that massive presence looming over Arya and Sansa like a storm cloud ready to break, and the show keeps the burned half with its raw puckered look that makes kids scream in King's Landing. But they tone it down, no missing ear, no exposed bone, just severe burns that heal into something cinematic and less visceral, more like a movie monster than the book's walking wound that reeks of old fire and infection. It makes Show Sandor's vulnerability with Sansa feel more tragic than grotesque, because in the books, that extreme disfigurement mirrors his soul's scars so perfectly that his rare kindnesses, like carrying a fevered Arya through the hills in a storm of swords, hit like thunder, proving he's more than the ruin he wears, while the show's cleaner version lets us focus on his redemption arc without flinching quite so hard from the mirror he shatters every time he unmasks. Finally, to wrap this Esso's detour, Daario Naharis bursts in as the Tyroshi sellsword who spices up Dany's bed and battles, but his book flair is pure peacock, where the show plays it cool. In A Storm of Swords, when he leads the Stormcrows to her service outside Yunkai, he's this flamboyant blade for hire with a forked blue beard, trimmed into twin points that match his wild blue-dyed curls falling to his collar, and those mustachios are twisted sharp and painted gold at the tips like gilded daggers, framing a face that's handsome in a sharp, fox-like way with those same vivid blue eyes that pierce like tourmaline. His clothes scream excess, vests and breeches in screaming yellows and golds slashed with party colors, gold coins stitched into his belts and boots, and a vest that laces loose over a bare old chest marked with fighting scars, all topped with an arak and stiletto at his hips that he twirls like toys. He's lean and lithe, built for speed over brute force, with a swagger that turns heads in Meereen markets. On the show, first Ead Skrein and then Mitchell Huisman take the role, keeping the long curls and the cocky grin that makes Dany's pulse race, but they ditch the dyes and the garish outfits for something more subdued, dark leathers and a simple beard that looks roguish but not ridiculous, turning him into a brooding mercenary heartthrob, rather than the book's walking carnival who dyes his nails blue to match and gifts Dany his weapons with a flourish that borders on farce. It streamlines his seduction of Dany, making their trysts feel steamy and serious instead of laced with that Tyroshi eccentricity. But in the books, that over-the-top look underscores how he's a wildcard in her court, a splash of color against the Khalasar's earth tones, and losing it makes show Daario blend in too much with her other advisors, diluting the chaos he brings to her bed and her throne. Alright, there you have it. Every single one of these changes has the same pattern. The show makes people easier to look at for 8 straight seasons. Totally makes sense for television, but it removes a huge chunk of what makes the books feel so real. On screen, almost everyone ends up somewhere between rugged and hot. So now I want to hear from you. Which one of these changes pisses you off the most? Lady Stoneheart getting completely erased, Ramsay turning into a heartthrob, or Theon keeping all his fingers? Drop your answer in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, kindly smash that like button, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one.